Hi, today let us talk about studies. I am sure nobody has ever enjoyed studying. I am sure nobody has ever loved book. And I am also very sure that the idea that you have about studying in books is not a very entertaining one. Well, come what may, there is no escape from studies and we have to study. We have to read books, we have to study, we have to become something, and that is the way life has been. But I would like to give you a different view about studies and their importance in our life today. And that has been written wonderfully, that has been quoted. So many lines from that particular essay have been quoted till date and in August gatherings, in intellectual meetings, in so many places where intellectual minds gather. And this essay has been written by Francis Bacon. Francis Bacon, an English philosopher, statesman and essayist, is best remembered for bringing about a transformation in the philosophy of science during his times with his observation and experimentation theory. Francis Bacon has written Of Studies. Of Studies is the most widely read essays written by him. It summarizes the benefits of reading books, and in the essay he presents a simply stated but very strong case in favor of reading, in favor of writing, and pointing the benefits mainly of reading. Why should we read in life? That is the entire aim of this essay. But the language used by the author is so wonderful, so impressive and so effective that we have been quoting it again and again. And this essay was written somewhere in the 16th, 17th century. So you can imagine the magnificence of this essay. And he begins the essay with the statement, studies serve for delight, for ornament and for ability. Their chief use for delight is in privateness and retiring, for ornament is in discourse, and for ability is in the judgment and disposition of business. So he says studies serve three major purposes. One is delight, one is ornament, and one is ability. Delight means something that gives you happiness. You are reading a novel, you love Sidney Sheldon, you're reading a novel, that is delight, you enjoy reading it, that is it. Then is for ornament. You read because you want to show off. You read because you want to go in front of a gathering. You want to present what you have read. You want to come across as a big orator, as an impressive orator. So that is ornament. Ornament is showing off. And third is for ability. The ability of a person is the knowledge of a person. To gain knowledge, one studies. The main use of studies for delight is in privateness, when you sit alone and when you're retiring. The second for ornament is when you give a speech, that is discourse. And for ability is in judging people, because studies make you wiser. Books make you wiser. They give you more knowledge and you can understand your business better. You can understand people better. And that is one of the major uses of studies. Then he says further, for expert men can execute and perhaps judge of particulars one by one, but the general counsels and the plots of marshalling of affairs come best from those that are learned. And then he contradicts himself a little by saying that all right, studies do make you very knowledgeable, studies make you wiser, and a lot of people who are very, very knowledgeable, they can understand the processes of their lives, of experiments, of the various business that they're doing in a much better manner. But the best advice comes from people. The way you should be executing a particular plot, that comes from people who are more experienced, who are more learned. For example, take your grandparents here. Your grandparents may not be very educated, but the advice that they give at times is so wonderful that never strikes a young mind, even if a person has done an MBA. Why? The reason being experience, the reason being age, and the reason being the ability through which they have understood how to guide people, and the ability through which they have understood life. And then he says further, to spend too much time in studies is sloth. To use them too much for ornament is affectation. And to make use of them wholly by their judgment is the humor of a scholar. So he says that too much studies in life makes you a sloth. You become sluggish, you become lazy, and you don't want to go out, you become inactive in life. Second is, and then to use them too much for ornament, to use them too much in discourse and pretend in front of a gathering that you are very knowledgeable is affectation, is absolute affectation. Affectation is showing off. And then third, to make judgment only by reading, to judge every person only based on the reading, is the wit of a scholar, is the humor of a scholar. A scholar, people try to be very, very scholarly, and scholars are people who have learned everything through their own reading, and that is why they are scholars. But to judge people based only on the reading is the wit or the humor of a scholar, is something that is not very appreciating, because practicality is different than what is given in books. Books give you a lot of knowledge, but at times practicality is also required. And then he says, they perfect nature and are perfected by experience. For natural abilities are like natural plants that need pruning by study, and studies themselves do give forth directions at large, except they be bounded in by experience. So he says, we must study a lot in life, but he further says that we all have natural abilities, just the way our natural forces, our natural abilities, our talents are there when you see a little child, and the little child is very good in dancing, is very good in studying, is very good in sports, is very good in talking, and he's very good as an orator. We know that this child is a multi-talented child. This child is a very, very versatile child. But then what happens? If we do not channelize the energies of that child, the child will be good in everything, a jack of all trades but a master of none. So he will never be able to give his best in one particular thing. He would be doing everything, yet not doing anything very, very nicely. So he says that just the way a particular shrub, a particular bush that grows in the gardens for the fencing, looks very beautiful, that has branches coming out from all the directions, till the time it is pruned, it is proined, till the time it is cut, it is properly cut and it is properly chopped off, it does not look beautiful, number one, and second, it does not become healthy, because the extra needs to be cut and all the energy needs to be channelized in one particular direction, and that is the aim. That is what he says, that yes, studies do channelize you, but to give judgment only based on studies is not a right thing. We know that knowledge is there, theory is there, but practicality is equally essential. And then he says that they are perfect in themselves. Studies are perfect in themselves, but at times they give you too many instructions. They give you too many instructions, and those instructions may not make us perfect in our judgment, because judging something also needs experience. So it is a blend of perfect study and perfect experience that gives you a holistic viewpoint towards things, and that gives you a holistic viewpoints towards a particular judgment that we make in our lives. And then he says further, crafty men condemn studies, simple men admire them, and wise men use them, for they teach not their own use, but that is a wisdom without them, and above them won by observation. So he says, crafty men, people who try to be very smart, people who try to be over smart, people who are always conspiring, people who are very, very shrewd, crafty people, shrewd people, they condemn studies. Although they will gain their experience through studying, to show off in front of people, they would condemn study, they would overrule study, they would say that do not study in life, and they never admit that they have grown through studying. They always will say that we have grown through experience. So crafty men are the men who condemn study. Simple men admire them. A simple man, if he gets a book to read, if he gets knowledge out of a book, the man is a happy man, or a woman is a happy woman. So simple people, they admire study. They do not want to know anything beyond it. They have read something, they understand something, and they like it. Then comes the wise men. But wise people are those people who know that they study, they make use of study, and they blend it with practicality, with the experience, because they want to take a holistic view of studies in life. And so they know that studies do not only teach their own use, but they also know that there is something beyond the bookish knowledge that is won by observation, that is won by observing so many people. And then he moves on further and he says, read not to contradict and confute, not to believe and take for granted, not to find talk and discourse, but to weigh and consider. He says, do not read in life only to confute, only to show that you are very knowledgeable, that you are very wise. Do not do that. Or do not read either to believe and take for granted whatever is written in a particular book, whatever is written in a newspaper. You read it, you understand it, and you believe it blindly. Do not do that. Question everything that you read. And also, do not read for simplicity, but read to weigh and consider. You read a particular line, you read a particular fact, think about it, form an opinion about it, and then consider it, whether you agree with it or you don't agree with it. That is the power of reading, and that is how reading should be. And then he writes one of his most famous lines that people have been quoting again and again in so many gatherings. He says, some books are to be tasted, others to be swallowed, and some few to be chewed and digested. Some books are to be tasted. The books like your favorite novel, you read that particular book, you just read a bit of it, you've tasted the book, you know what is going to be there, and you don't go into the details. Some books to be chewed, some books to be chewed and digested. That is your books that you study at the time of the examination. You must read them thoroughly, you must learn them thoroughly. That is chewing and also digesting. You must also remember it, and that is a test of your memory that comes after reading. And the third ones are to be swallowed. You've read them completely, and you've just gulped them in because either the content of the book was too large, or probably you didn't like the matter too much, or maybe you did not want to go into the depths of that particular book. So reading a particular book, every book is read in a different manner. And then we have some books are to be read only in parts, while others to be digested, not curiously, and some few to be read wholly and with diligence and attention. Some books also may be read by deputy. Remember, this is very important. By deputy, and extracts made of them by others. But that would be only in the less important arguments and the meaner sort of books. Else, distilled books are like distilled water, flashy things. What he means to say here is there is another fourth category of books that are not originally printed. For example, we have a book that has been taken out by Penguin Classics, that is a publisher, and we have one of the Shakespeare's plays. Suppose we are reading The Merchant of Venice. Merchant of Venice, published by one particular foreign author, is given as it is, the way it was written by William Shakespeare. But today, you get so many Merchant of Venice published by various publishers, that is either an abridged version, or there's something missing from the entire text, or there's something added from the author's side or the publisher's side, so on and so forth. So, those kind of books are not original books. They don't give you a real viewpoint about life. They don't tell you about the real intentions of what the author had written. These are the books that have been written, but in a abridged form, in a manner that is not original, in a way that is not the original way it was written, and the author's intentions are lost, the value of that book is lost, and ultimately that book turns out to be the meaner sort of book because they are very lowly priced. People get attracted to it, and they're very flashy in their appeal, because a student would want to go for the same book at a lesser price, but they don't know that a lot of essential elements of the book and the author are missing from that particular book. And those books are like distilled water. Distilled water looks so flashy, so clear, you feel like drinking it. But what is missing from that water? The essential minerals, the essential elements. So the same kind of books are the guides or the help books that people use. And those are the books that look very flashy, look very attractive, but eventually and ultimately, those are the books that do not have the real content, and the real content and the feeling of the original is missing in those books. And so he goes on further to say, reading maketh a full man, conference a ready man, and writing an exact man. Reading makes a full man, a knowledgeable person. You read, you have so much of knowledge, you are updated. That's a full man. Conference, a ready man. Conference, talking, speaking. So when a person speaks too much, he becomes argumentative, he becomes logical, and a ready man, he becomes a very witty man. He becomes a person who can answer anything at any point of time. And because the person is so confident in speaking, but writing makes an exact man. When you write down something, when you learn it, you become exact. There's so many facts and figures that you tend to forget before an examination if you have just read them. But if you have written them, there are very less chances of you forgetting them, and your information will tend to be exact. So writing is something that gives you exact information, and that makes a person exact. There are various uses of speaking, reading, and writing. And then he says, therefore, if a man write little, he had need to have a great memory. If a person writes little, he should have great memory so that he can recall the right things at the right time. If a man further, if the man confers little, if the man argues less, if a man talks less, he had need have a present wit. He should be very, very witty. He should be very intelligent. He should be very ready. And he should be able to answer the right things at the right time. And if he read little, he had need have much cunning to seem to know what he does not. And if a person reads little, he should be so cunning and so smart to show to the world and to let people know that he is knowledgeable. Now that is up to the person to show how he does that, because reading makes a full man, a knowledgeable person. So if a person otherwise reads less, he should either be able to gain knowledge through thin air, or he should pretend, he should have so much of cunningness, he should be so smart to pretend to the people that he is a knowledgeable person. Histories make men wise, poets witty, and the mathematics subtile, natural philosophy deep, moral grave, logic and rhetoric able to contend. So he says, he is listing the various uses of various subjects in life, why people read history, so that we become wise. Whatever is history that has been told to us makes you more wiser. Poets witty. If you read poetry, if you are fond of poetry, you would be more witty. Your creativity is tested to all the limits. You will be more creative. You will be having more thinking power, and you will become more intelligent and witty. The mathematics, subtile. The mathematics makes you subtile, very, very swift in your dealings, because you become perfect. And natural philosophy, deep. Philosophy always makes you think more. So it makes you deep in your thought process. Moral, grave. Moral education makes you grave, thoughtful, serious. It makes you take your life more seriously. And logic and rhetoric able to contend. When you study logic, science, and when you study rhetoric, law, both these are subjects that make possible for you to contend, to talk, to defend yourself, to give viewpoints on a particular topic. And that is the entire use of logic and rhetoric. Now there is a line that he writes in Latin further, and he says that practices when pursued zealously turn into habits. Practice something. If we practice mathematics, and when we practice mathematics earnestly every day, it becomes a part of our existence. It becomes our habit. It becomes something that is there within us naturally, and we naturally become good with that particular subject. And then he says, there is no stone or impediment in the wit, but may be wrought out by fit studies. He says, there is no problem in the wit, there is no problem in a man's understanding that cannot be sorted out by studies, by studying various kind of subjects. And then further he elaborates and says, just the way a person has a lot of diseases, the diseases of the body are cured by various kind of exercises, we have in the same way the diseases of the mind that are cured by various kind of reading various subjects. And then he says, Bowling, like the bowling is good for the stone and the reins. Bowling is very good for your stones, for your kidneys and for your reins. Shooting for the lungs and the breast. Gentle walking for the stomach. Riding for the head and the like. So just the way exercises are good for various body parts, in the same way we have, if a man's wit be wandering, if a person is unable to concentrate on work, if the person is unable to concentrate on what the person is doing, let him study the mathematics. Because if you solve a mathematics sum and if you falter in that sum, the entire sum goes wrong, the result is wrong. You have to come all over again and you have to begin from the beginning. So if a person's wit, if the concentration of a person is less, let the person study mathematics. And then he says, if his wit be not apt to distinguish or find differences, if a person cannot distinguish between right or wrong, then let him study what? Let him study the schoolmen, let him study the philosophers, let him study the philosophers who have done a lot of study on what is right and what is wrong in life, because the philosophers have been hair splitters. They go to the depth of every problem, and then you become more knowledgeable after reading what the philosophers have done or what they have read in their lives. And then he says, if he not be apt to bear or beat over matters, and to call up one thing to prove and illustrate another, let him study the lawyer's cases. If a person is unable to defend himself, if a person is unable to give logic for a particular thing, if a person cannot beat over matters, let him study law. And in the same way, every defect of the mind has a special receipt, has a special subject, and that is the importance of reading, or that is the importance of studies in our lives.